I need some traction.
So who here uses an Atlassian product? Jira, Confluence, Trello. Yeah, everybody. Okay, cool.
Wow.
So she'll take feature requests later.
No bug reports.
Yeah. Why don't we start out? Can you just tell the audience a little bit about your background so they can get to know you, Pratima?
Sure, absolutely. Didn't you want to do it like a dance routine?
You want to do? Okay,
Dance
does everyone want to
routine?
get up and stretch? Is that what we want to do?
No, up to you. I thought you wanted
Yeah.
to do a dance routine.
Me?
Yeah.
No, I didn't practice. But yeah, we can get up. Is everybody feeling good? You want to get up and do a quick stretch? Let's do it. How about that? You going to get up and stretch? Okay. Feels good. It's getting a lot. It's hot. A lot of bodies in here. Post-lunch. People seem relatively alert, though, so that's good. All right, cool.
Okay.
Now I think they're ready
Now they're ready.
for a dance routine or your background, whichever.
I'll do both.
Okay.
My name is Pratima Arora. I do product for Confluence Cloud along with running the business. For Confluence, I have been with Atlassian 2 years. I spent 9 years at Salesforce. Prior to that, worked on multiple products like mobile, redesigning the UI with Lightning, and also Einstein, which was a machine learning. Doing product for, gosh, ever. I'm going to date myself if I tell you how many decades. I'm a mother of 2 and a geek at heart. That's how I describe myself.
Great, awesome. So people obviously are familiar with Atlassian products. Maybe you can just kind of give your perspective on the company, its background, and how it has a different approach to product maybe than other companies.
Absolutely. It was great to see so many hands go up for people who use Atlassian. Atlassian builds teamwork software. So if you guys have ever heard the mission, it's like how do we unleash the potential of every team is kind of the mission of the company. The key products that you might have heard is Jira, Confluence, Trello, Bitbucket. Those are the few that are very popular of our products, though there are 10 of them actually. There's a long tail of products there as well. Aji actually is presenting after, was actually worked at Atlassian on HipChat and Stride days before we divested that product to Slack. Atlassian is growing really fast. We grew at 41% last year, hitting $1 billion in our revenue, went IPO in 2015, if anybody was following the company. So we've been seeing a massive growth in the company, and it's been wonderful to see and be there and see the ride there. So we'll talk about, if you're in a growth stage, a bit more, how do you manage products and how do you think about things today as well.
Oh, and you guys have a different perspective on selling product from a lot of other enterprise companies, right?
Yes, actually that was one of the things that attracted me to Atlassian. In 2015, when Atlassian filed for its IPO filing, they had core beliefs. And our founders had put some core beliefs in there. And one of the core beliefs, which was very interesting, was we believe in products that are bought and not sold. So I'll repeat that because it's very interesting if you hear it for a second. We believe in products that are bought, not sold. And when you think about it, a lot of enterprise software companies actually have a massive sales team and are actually using their sales arm to sell the product. That means you need a demo or you need somebody to come show you how to use it. Whereas Atlassian philosophy was totally opposite. It was like, hey, it's going to be a self-service model. It is going to be very much product-driven, and it's going to be very light on sales. We do have some salespeople, but mostly for our larger accounts. And it's going to be, we're going to heavily invest in R&D versus hiring a big sales team. So what that means is the R&D investment for Atlassian, actually other companies do that too. Dropbox is another example where there's a heavier investment in the product itself, in R&D itself. And the two philosophies are people want self-service. As long as we can get people up to running in fast time to value, they're more likely to start with you and stay with you, and you don't need somebody to spend hours configuring and showcasing that. So that was one of the big philosophies, and that's continued till the time as you think about how Atlassian has grown over the years.
Great. So the title of the panel was how to connect what you're doing as a product person to the top business metrics. I know as PMs we can sometimes just get pulled into the weeds, what's going on this sprint, what's going on next sprint, but sometimes it can be tough, especially in larger organizations, to connect it to the top. So we're going to be talking about business metrics, but why don't we start out with why should people here even care about it? What's in it for them as far as if you're a PM?
Totally. I think why is very important, right? As PMs, you always ask why 5 times. If you don't do that, you should. My quick raise of hands, how many people are in B2B industry versus B2C?
B2B.
Yeah.
On
Okay. How about
B2C?
B2C? Okay.
All right, yeah. See,
So we got a
mainly
bit.
B2C.
We got a majority. We
A
were
lot,
thinking,
yeah.
how should we think about the examples that I used today from B2B to B2C? It's good to see we have a good chunk of B2B companies represented here. So let's go back to the idea of product being bought versus sold, right? So if you go back to that philosophy, now suddenly us as product managers, like I actually carry a quota, I actually have a P&L, and I'm responsible for a forecast and a goal for the company. So I work with my CFO. Being a product leader and having that, it's odd. Not odd, actually. It's becoming more and more real in most of the enterprise companies because product leaders do carry a number as you think about it. And in this product-led development, is that the new term? Product-led growth, Dan?
Product-driven growth, product-led growth. You see
Product-driven
those two terms,
growth,
yeah.
those two terms getting used. You suddenly start seeing, it doesn't mean product manager left, by the way. So let's correct that. We'll come back to that. But product-led means that suddenly your product is selling itself. And when you are product managers for products where you want it to be self-bought, you start thinking about business metrics. And so that's very important in this new era as we evolve into this industry. But there are 3 reasons I'll give you why you should care about business metrics. And if you are not caring today already. A, it helps you prioritize, right? That's our number 1 job. When you hire, I ask, what do you do every day? I prioritize. If you have 10 things to do, and 3 are the ones who are going to move the needle, here you go. You know which are the 3 ones you're going to help prioritize first. Second is it helps you make a case or a business case. A lot of times us as product managers, we are also the leader for the team, putting a business case out there saying, hey, why should we do this? What are the reasons for us to invest in this versus other things? And if you're in a position like that where you are going up to senior leadership or making a case for those things, it helps you actually put a number out there. You'll be surprised how many people latch to it and say, oh, actually I'm going to see X percentage or Y percentage increase or decrease in those things. And third, it helps you tell a story, right? We all tell stories every day. Helps motivate our teams. It helps us tie back to what the company is doing. This goes in and out, right? Yeah. Okay. Can you guys still hear me? Yeah. Okay. I won't mess with it. But it actually helps you tell a story. So those are the 3 reasons which are core to product management, why you should care about business metrics. And why should you be thinking about them on a day-to-day basis while you are working on your projects or work.
Okay, great. So you obviously think a lot about business metrics. So how do you think about it, and what are the business metrics that you focus on? Because I know some people are excited about getting involved in metrics, but they don't know where to start. And so what kind of advice or framework do you have for them?
Yeah, actually it's very simple. There are literally 3. And if you boil it down to those 3, you'll be surprised how simple it is. 3 things you care about. You care about new customers. We all care about getting new customers. We care about keeping the customers you have, so retention or reducing churn. And the last one is getting dollars out of your customers, right? So the dollar per user or the amount of dollars you get. If you can remember these 3 metrics or 3 top line that you care about out of this talk, you're a winner, because now you should be thinking about what I am doing, which one does it ladder up to? Am I working on something that helps me get new people? Am I working on something that helps me retain my existing customers? Or am I working... Did I lose the mic again? Yeah. You want to close this? Yeah, okay. We'll use this. Hello. Hello. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Yeah. And then the third thing comes down to be, I'll repeat it, getting new users, right? How do I get new users? Am I laddering up to retaining those people, or am I laddering up to getting more dollar per user? We can I want to go in detail a lot of them, Dan, if that's okay.
No, definitely, yeah.
And give some examples. When you're thinking about new users, let's actually break down each of them. There are 2 ways to get new users. Given a lot of you guys are in B2B, new users you get like brand new logos. Like if you're in a B2B company, you're like, hey, a new company is going to use me. And that's where you start. You work closely with marketing. Michelle was up here. You work with your marketing team. You come up with like, hey, this is a new product. What's my new product market fit? And how do you launch a new product? Or you're getting new customers. What's your evaluation funnel? What's your conversion rate? And how you're doing through that. Second is, which in Atlassian terms, we call them land and expand internally. We say you land with one customer or a team in this bottoms-up world, we don't sell to C-levels. Like Atlassian hardly sells to C-level executives. So you're like, hey, a team would start using your product or an individual starts using it. Once you enter that organization, how do you expand further out, right? So you land with a team and then you expand or you proliferate. Actually, Salesforce in its early days did that same. It would start with a small sales team and then 10 other sales teams would use it. Atlassian does the same. A lot of companies do that. So now you're getting two new customers, either brand new, or you getting, hey, I already have a footprint in this organization. How do I get 10 other teams to use it, which is the expand. For the former, you'll think about onboarding. You'll invest in activation. You would invest in self-service. For expansion, you actually go deep in virality. You'll be surprised how important virality has become in this new B2B world. And I know Aji talks about virality right after this, going deep on some of the things you can do about virality. But share button, how many of you guys have share button everywhere, right? It used to be in consumer software. Now you see a share button in like every enterprise software. We worked on a share button too and revamped. And when we were building on, hey, what is the metric that share is driving, you start looking at, hey, these many X number of new users I want to get on top of the baseline. Share is interesting because in B2B world, there's an admin. How many of us are afraid of the admins? Like, hey, if I share with Dan, now an admin has to approve me because I'm in an organization. There are lots of ways to do it. An example we did at Atlassian was we gave admins an upper limit. They were like, hey, you have 1,000 people, take 500. Like, you put an upper limit of 500. We charge you only for the people who use it, but you have an upper limit. So if I invited Dan, it didn't need to go through an approval for admin. Dan automatically got in as long as the admin knew what the upper limit was. So even with B2B software, you can have virality loops that really help your software flourish in organizations to do that. So that was the new customer piece. Then you come to retention. My biggest surprise in this world is how much less do product managers talk about retention. Like, unbelievable. How little do we talk about retention?
As much as they should.
As
compared
much
to
as
how
they
much you should,
yeah.
right? Yes.
Compared to how much you should, how little you talk. There was an article I was reading. It was like, hey, I read all the product manager job postings, and nobody talked about retention. The funny thing is, if you have a mature product, or even if it's 1 or 2 years old, you found a product market fit, retention should be something top of mind for all of us. It is a core thing. A lot of people work in mature products because now you've got this person in. They have come and used your product either for free or for dollars. They've already given you that chance. Now it's your chance to keep them. And if you're not doing your job to keep them, then they're going to fly away. A few metrics there comes to delight. Like, are you delighting your users? So you look at customer satisfaction score or NPS score. You look at usage. So that's a very common one. When you release something new, you're like, hey, is people using it? And the last one is engagement. So you start thinking about, hey, what are the engagement metrics? And then you ladder them up to retention.
And I would jump in on that one. So like there's a mix in there of what you're saying of, I like to always clarify behavioral indicators and
metrics,
data versus attitudinal. So NPS and customer sat is attitudinal. It's people telling you opinions. And then actually looking at your engagement or like your explicit retention rate, that's behavioral. And so that's kind of like if you have a large user base and you're looking at the actual retention rate, and you could typically look at a curve, but if you just pick a certain day, like, hey, we can look at 7-day retention or 15-day or 30-day, you can track that as a daily time series. That's a very powerful metric. And like you said, not enough people are looking at that every week.
Actually, retention can also happen at different levels, right? There's a retention when people just start using your product or they start trying it. So you're like, hey, how's my retention in the first 7 days? And then the thing is, how's the retention on an ongoing basis? I actually had maybe I was saving an example for later, but I'll use it right now. If you think about retention, it is interesting because if your top line goal is to improve retention, we call it the behavioral and the qual metrics. So behavioral are your quant metrics, and your qual and quant comes together, you get the best insights to move it. So if your top line goal is like, hey, as a company level, I want to move, increase retention, reduce churn, kind of opposite sides of a coin, what are the things you would do? And at that time, you go, for people who have left, you would do the qual. You go ask them. You actually would go ask, why did you leave me? And you'll do a churn survey or a thing like that. So you'll get a lot of that feedback. Hey, something was wrong, like performance was wrong. You will never get that from a quant data. But then you look at quant data, and you know what would you look at quant data? Is your cohort or those people who are highly engaged and would never leave your product. There was a term, I don't know who coined the term, but if you've heard AHA metrics, Facebook had this AHA metric. They said if I could, in early days, if I get to 10 friends in 7 days, they would never leave. Evernote had one too. They like 2 devices in 7 days will never leave. We think a lot about what is the AHA metric for our products. Like for Confluence, it's kind of funny. It's 5 views in a week or an action in a week. So we do weekly AHA metrics. And once you get to that level, we see a retention of that cohort being like 99 percentile. So then you start looking at quant and qual data, and you say, hey, I'm going to work on the people who are telling me in the qual, like performance, and then ladder that up. But I would also want to look at the quant side and look at my best people and see what they are doing and bring that engagement to the other cohort to look at it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the other thing going back to revenue is if you do a lifetime value calculation, it's got a 1 minus your churn rate in there. Because that 1 minus, even small improvements can have like nonlinear improvements in lifetime value, right?
Churn, if you get a point increase in churn, has a much higher revenue impact than a 10-point increase in new customers, actually.
And a lot of times people are chasing, what's the new feature, new feature, new feature? If you just kind of pay attention to the qual and address the things that making people churn, it helps a lot. Cool, and then the third area was growing revenue. I'm sure, so Pratima listed 3 areas: growing new users, retaining users, and growing revenue per user. Who is more focused, their top goal right now is growing new users, what they say, acquiring new users. And who's more focused on reducing churn or improving retention right now? And who's more focused on growing revenue per user? Okay, so we got a good mix. So
So for the revenue per user is interesting. You can say, there are few tactics a lot of companies take, both B2C and B2B actually. It's you have different editions, right? So I have a free, I have standard, I have premium. You guys don't use Uber here, but Uber also has.
Not yet.
Uber also has this extra large. If you want a bigger car or a deluxe or some, even like simple companies use this because what they're trying to do is to get more dollars. From the same user, give them a better experience. For the people who are willing to pay, you should start thinking about, for that extra payment, what extra things do you get? So few things that you work on, like we've been working on a new premium edition that actually got launched for Jira and Confluence this week. But the idea is, hey, how can we give better experience, but also at the same time try to get more dollars per user? Other ways to think about is upsell and cross-sell, right? So if you think about editions as an upsell play, then there's a cross-sell play. And the cross-sell comes down to, if you, in your portfolio, have more than one product, instead of a salesperson picking up a call and saying, hey, you should use these 2 products together, what can you do within the product to make that cross-sell easier or the cross-flow easier? So app switcher, like, hey, can I have an app switcher where I can see all the products? Can I have very joint integration points across the product where I can see those things? And then seeing, then you're not working on I call it the local maxima versus the global maxima. If you're a multi-product company, there's a local maxima is your product. Global maxima is company's revenue, right? At that point, when you're in cross-sell world, you're not even optimizing for your own product, you're actually optimizing for the whole company. So that's very interesting as you start laddering yourself up to saying, hey, what are the things I would do to get those 3 things? Great,
so once we've got clarity, those are our 3 goals. How do you, the business metrics you could go after, how do you set goals and track your progress against those goals?
Actually, we use OKRs. Okay. Has anybody heard?
Who uses OKRs here?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, cool.
Keep your hand up if it's going well. Is it going well? Okay.
OKR was a framework actually decades old. I think originally started in Intel in their heydays. There's a book called Measure What Matters. If you guys haven't read it, John Doerr's book, I highly recommend it. It's a great book when they talk about what is an OKR stands for. O stands for objective. KR stands for key results. It's actually a very simple model. Your objective is what you want to achieve. It's kind of your goal. Your key results are generally 3 to 5 Not yearly, they're mostly monthly, quarterly, more tactical goals, and you give them a score. You give them a score 0 to 1. 0.7 is what you plan to achieve, and 1.0 is what you stretch, what you think you should achieve. So 0.7 is think about pass and fail in my mind, and a 1.0 is what you knocked it out of the park. So that's kind of how the scoring works. And then, so we use OKRs, and we use them at different levels. So this is how we do laddering. We have OKRs at a company level, so like at a strategic level. We do it at a product level. Like Atlassian has multiple products, so we do a strategic level. Then we'll do OKRs at Confluence level, so I have OKRs, and then we do it at a team level. And we ladder then up. So the team OKR should ladder up to the product, and the product should ladder up to the company. This helps you connect those pieces from all the way down to up.
Great. Yeah, and one other book I'd recommend is Christina Woodkey wrote a book called Radical Focus that came out before Measure What Matters. It's kind of a novel style teaching if you've ever read The Goal. So if you want to geek out on OKR, you can check out those 2 books. So can you talk more about, so that I like that idea, and when I worked at Intuit, they did a really good job of laddering things from what you're working on to what the team, to the business unit, to the company. Can you talk more about how we should think about laddering up and maybe share an example?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I think there are 3 things you should do. First, you should know which of those 3 things you ladder up to, right? So if any new customers, existing customers, revenue per user, like you have to know that. If you're not working that ladders up to any of those 3 things, you shouldn't work on it. Like maybe change your project, move on to something else, or recommend your boss, this is not the right thing to do. If you are, once you know that, I think you come up with how would you measure it. That's very critical. We spend a lot of time debating what's a primary metric, secondary metric, and a guardrail metric. So primary is what's the goal you want to move, and how would it go up. Secondary is you want to make sure what other effects it could have, and the guardrail is you don't screw up something else that you shouldn't in the process of doing that. And then the third thing you should think about is as you are putting these metrics, we come up with a list of hypotheses. Because when you start a project, you're like, hey, I want to improve retention, but I don't know. And my customers are telling me these 5 things, or my data is telling me these 5 things. I don't know which one will actually move the needle the most. So you'll come up with a list of hypotheses, and you'll say, okay, I know these 5 things should move retention, for example. And if I work on them, but I don't know which one will have the biggest impact. So at that time, you write down those 5 hypotheses, and then you test. And you prove each hypothesis yes or no, and you measure impact of each of them. And at that point, after you've done those, you can say, hey, I'm going to invest more heavily into 3 because they yielded the best results. So it goes back to, if you've heard this framework called Build, Measure, Learn. In other words, that's I think Dan, you talked about is lean product management. But it's very important to know what those key hypotheses you're testing and which one will have the biggest impact. So retention, as going back to, was a great example I use. Like, hey, if you know your top line goal is to increase retention, you know what's your qual and quant data telling you. You come up with the hypothesis, prove them, disprove them. That's what we did. Performance was one thing we were coming up again and again at Atlassian, and then we could correlate back it up to there. I do know we are at 2 minutes, so I would want to give some time for other questions too.
Yeah, we got time. That's before we get to Q&A. So yeah.
Oh, that's before we get to Q&A.
Any other examples
of, so I can actually
of that laddering from?
Yeah, so maybe I'll give another one then. So let's go back to new users one. That's another of my favorite. We've talked about retention quite a bit. When you're looking at new users, again, remember we were talking about, hey, are you getting a new user by landing? That means a brand new user to your company, or you are doing a new user that is coming through an expand play. So one of the awesome stuff we always talk about, hey, we should have awesome onboarding. Like in the past when we've done that, we talk about you should have great onboarding. But onboarding is a great product feature or a great product area to work on because you can easily ladder it up to new users. So when you're thinking about onboarding, for example, if you're working on it, you know what your conversion rate is. So you know how many people are trying. If you have a try funnel, first you should know what your funnel is. Are people trying your product or directly buying it? Even if you have a sales team, you have a funnel. Even a sales team has a funnel, and you know where people come down to that ladder. So number one step for getting new customers would be understanding your funnel. Do you have a free funnel? Do you have a try funnel? And where are people coming for? And for each step, what's the conversion rate? So like what percentage of people are moving from the try to actually using it for X number of days? And how many of them are actually buying and then paying you dollars? And once you know that conversion rate, you can say, hey, I'm going to work on activation or onboarding for this user, not the first user, the X user, because I want to retain that user. And for that user, I know what the baseline is. And if I make these improvements, we can actually increase the conversion rate for my active user from X to Y. So that's another way to think about it when you're looking at new users, being very close to your funnel at that time.
All right, cool. Looks like we're at time. So Pratima, thank you so much for sharing all your advice. I appreciate it. Thanks.
I need some traction. You need some traction. Let's get some traction.